So here we are in another Google, not Google Hangout. I was going to say Google Hangout, but Google finished that. YouTube finished the Hangouts. So now we are using a different thing. We are using Zoom, and we are putting in YouTube. So they don't give us the possibility to do it in a direct way. We do it in an indirect way. And today we are here to do another, let's call it a hangout, even though, and it's an interesting topic because every day we do negotiation, and today we will talk about 9 ways of negotiating a win-win outcome. So these are advices from our own experience, from what we read, but mostly I think from what we experienced. So let's start with our recent mother, Sophie. Can I have one way?
Yeah, of course.
And congratulations once again.
Thank you so much. I got a baby girl, so yeah, now she's with her grandparents for a moment, so it's all under control. I was thinking about how you start out a relationship when you're negotiating, and I've been in quite hard negotiations a few times when the person you're trying to negotiate with is really sort of quite demanding to start with. And it's not something wrong with being demanding, but it's quite hard when each demand is like a big obstacle. So you have to go through all those obstacles to be able to even negotiate. And I found that quite demanding, and it's like as if they don't want to maybe give way for something to go through, but they have decided everything that they need, and they will not move, and they will not change their mind if you don't agree with everything that they say to start with. So that's my number 1 tip: be quite careful with the way you put through or like you present your demands and what you want, because that can almost put that other person off. So that's the number 1 thing. Be a bit careful to start with, and have a conversation before you set out your way of doing it.
Okay, thank you very much. Peter, you're first.
Okay, so mine is be willing to walk away from the beginning. There's a famous book called Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury, and then there was another book written called Start with No by Jim Camp, and he was almost taking a different position to Fisher and Ury, because he is saying you have to be willing to walk away right from the beginning, because you do not have any negotiation position if you're not. So it's been fascinating living in the UK and watching the what Filipe called a slow motion car crash of Brexit. The United Kingdom was hampered all along by the fact that there were many people in our government that didn't want to leave the EU, weren't prepared to leave the EU at all. And so the government was hamstrung. There are many who believe that it would have been far healthier to say we're willing to walk away with no deal at all, because then you can have a proper conversation. And of course, the EU doesn't want Britain to leave, because we're I think the third, I say we because I'm living in the UK, the third biggest contributor to the budget, and there's a whole bunch of other reasons why it's not in the EU's interest. And some would argue it's not in the UK's interest either. But the point is that any negotiation, you have to be willing to walk away completely. If I want to buy your house and you know that I have to buy your house, then you are in the stronger position negotiation-wise. So find a place where you are willing to walk away, and then you can sit down and have a proper negotiation.
Good one, Peter. Actually, that reminds me my tactics in Arab bazaars. I always walk away before I buy.
Yeah. Because of course many of us are not used to the whole haggling thing, and when we go into a shop in the Middle East and we we think it is what they say it is. And I remember getting used to the idea, and most times I'd walk away and then I'd be amazed how cheap I could get it for. So yes.
So my advice is there is no commitment in defeat. Basically, when you are negotiating, you have to think how the other one will get something, because total and complete defeat of the other part assures you that you will not have the commitment in the future of the agreed, what was agreed. So you will have a victory, but you will have a defeat on the long run.
Yeah.
So that explains a lot about 20th century problems in Europe.
Yeah.
So, Sophie, second.
Yeah. Well, my second thought is connected to what you mentioned, that I don't think it's worth to get a new enemy when you're negotiating, especially if you're like in an organization where you may negotiate again in the future. And it's not fun to be remembered as the bulldozer who just do their thing and win the first negotiation, but then in the end you may not win the war. You know, it's not worth it to win every battle. And I think, like, I've been in that situation in a large organization where I worked in the UK, and it was a lot of lots of negotiation. I was sitting like for 100 hours with lawyers to get things through. And when you've been negotiating a while, it's worth having like a holiday from the negotiation, because it will give you new energy, it will give you new thoughts, you may read something else, and that gives you another way of looking at your problems. And I think it also helps your brain to relax a little bit, so you can find new solutions. So if you get stuck, it's not worth to get a new enemy, number one, and then take a break. It could be a day, it could be a week, it could be a month. It depends on what you're negotiating about.
Okay, thank you very much. Peter.
Okay, my second one is to think of yourself as sitting on the same side of the table, because the idea is to put the shared issues on the table in front of you and work on the problem together. So it creates more of a collaboration mindset rather than a tug of war or banging of heads coming from different directions. So that requires a degree of openness and honesty, and a willingness to listen to the other side as well, and work on the assumption that somewhere there will be a position that satisfies needs of both sides. But that's still, you still need to have in the background the willingness to step away from the table altogether and say, okay, it doesn't look like we can find a way. But as Sophie said, sometimes walking away, coming back again is another way of sitting down and continuing to work on the problem. So having to get an answer right then and there can put too much pressure on both sides. But the key is this, just to imagine sitting on the same side of the table with a shared range of issues and work out the best way forward.
Okay. My second one is has to do with a lot with what you both told. I would say that there is only missing one word, and that's the word that I wanted to put is preparation is essential. The idea that you go to a negotiation and it's like, okay, it's like going to the market, that you don't prepare. Even when I go with that example to the market, to the Arab market, I put a price in my head. And sometimes you have to think not out of the box. So, for instance, not only a price, but think what else can you take with that price. So suddenly it's not a question of the price of that item. So it is, you do a combo, let's say. So basically you have to prepare your negotiation and the negotiation of your counterpart. So it's a kind of chess game that you have to play beforehand, and to understand what, and like you were saying, you have to see from, let's say, sit on their side and understand what they are wanting to get. Again, because it should be a win-win. That's the theme today. So
Yes.
Sophie, yours next.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, well, my final tip about negotiation and win-win is to think about the details. Because if you get things written down, go through everything once again when you have agreed upon what you should agree about, and go through the details. The devil is in the details, and if there is one or two things that are missing out or not clear, you may have to start all over again. And I've been there before, and I went up on a business meeting together with one of my colleagues, tried to agree things, and we sat in the meeting and everything was agreed. And then once when he got back to his office, he sent me an email and sent me a big invoice. And I was like, what? What is this about? We just agreed that I shouldn't pay you. That was what we agreed in the meeting. He said, no. Okay. So always go through everything in the, get it written down, make your own notes, get all points agreed with other parts, and the devil will not hunt you.
Peter, your final.
Yes. My final one is, which builds on what we've already talked about, is I really like the idea of preparation. I really like the idea of capturing the detail and making sure it's clear, because different people can interpret things differently. And so my final one is to listen deeply to the other party. I recently read a book called The Tao of The Tao of Dialogue. And the authors talk about 4 levels of listening to noise. So we're looking at the other person, we see their lips moving, and we hear blah, 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 blah. And all we're waiting for is for them to shut up so that we can speak. The second level is listening for content. So we're looking for points where we might agree or disagree with them, but we're still thinking about what we want to say. We're not really caring what they think. The next level is listening to what they really want to say. What's their intention? Because as Sophie's pointed out, sometimes we can hear something different to what they're thinking, and we need to check our understanding of what they're really thinking and saying. So what is it they're really trying to say, and repeat it back in different words and check that the understanding is there. And the deepest level of all is listening for identity. So who is this person? What is important to them? What are their values? What are their hopes? What are their fears? Because the better we understand that person, the more able we are to have influence, the more able we are to negotiate effectively. So that's my final tip.
Okay, and let me give you, actually I had another final tip, but because of what Sophie said, I changed my last one, not because
you have a backup.
But because I want to share a very fast story with you about getting the details. It was my divorce, basically. And you have a negotiation that it's one of the most difficult ones because there is a lot of emotion going around. So it is a difficult negotiation. And one of the things that sometimes happens is that after people do, okay, we decide to do like this about the house, the car, the kids, blah, 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 blah. When the document comes from the lawyer, maybe people have a recollection that is different of what they said, especially because emotions are on it. Yeah. So since then, I use something that is very powerful, is that if there is kind of possibility of a lot of details and everything, I do like this. I record what are the conclusions. So for instance, one of the things that I don't advise is that you record negotiations. Let's say that we are talking and we are client and provider and we are negotiating, but we can record the end. Let's say, what are the results? So we say, okay, we agree this and this and this and this and this and this. Is it okay? Okay. And it is more practical and faster than doing a minute or of the meeting, because that will have to go through approval, and then that was not exactly what I said, because written word actually is much more complicated to interpret than if we say it like this. So do we agree on this and this and this? And people might say it yes on this way, but might be completely different if it's a written word, because it goes for interpretation. So
But
actually,
surely the spoken word is the same.
yeah, but the moment is captured much better than if you write it down and then you start to think about the variance and the possibility of interpretation. While if you are at the end of a meeting that you just agree on stuff, we have now, everybody has a mobile camera, so we can use it. We have webcams. I did that. It worked fine, because we even sent that to the lawyer. So it was a way of to write the draft in a much more precise way. And then we also could compare what we said with what was written, instead of seeing what we write with what would the lawyer write, written. So it's much more messier. It is a very practical thing. It is strange. People are not used to it, but it works fantastic. So anything else that you want to add?
Not for me, thanks.
No, I think it's very important to be quite, well, I just feel it out of fashion to be like the hard negotiator. I think it's more, we live in a world right now where we are looking for the soft skills, and use your soft skills when you're negotiating, and I think you will be more successful.
Yeah. And for that, active listening is very important.
Yeah.
So guys, once again, it was a pleasure to be with you guys and to exchange views. We did it in a very short format. I think this is even much better because we are fast and to the point. So thank you very much. And our next Hangout will be for sure in 2020. So have a great year.